Small human female sighted on level 3.
What are you calling small?
Hello, and welcome to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. I'm your host, as always, Josh Carr, and it's the Series 2 finale. It's the last episode in the series. So, as usual, I've pulled out all the stops, and I've got a very, very, very good guest for you all. I have the one and only Sophie Aldred. How are you?
Oh, what a great introduction. Thanks, Josh.
Oh, thank you very much.
I didn't realise I was the finale. Wow.
You are.
I'm the walk down. I'm the
Yeah.
the bit at the end of the panto where they all put on their posh frocks and walk down the steps. That's me.
That is you. That's you.
Yeah.
Everyone is so excited about this, by the way. When I tweeted out that you were coming on, it went mental. I had to have a little break from Twitter because my phone was just exploding with notifications. Yes, you broke Twitter. We've got so much to talk about. I'll start where I always start when it comes to Doctor Who, and that's where did your journey with Doctor Who begin? Were you a fan growing up? That's what I wanted to know. Were you someone who watched Doctor Who religiously, or was it just a case that it was on in the background sometimes? What was your experience growing up with Doctor Who?
Well, we had a little black and white TV because I'm that old. And I must have seen Patrick Troughton, or I don't even know whether we actually had a telly then, but the first time I really remember watching was when John Pertwee was the Doctor. And I would actually make my younger brother sit on the sofa and watch it while I actually was sort of watching it through a crack in the door. So he could tell me the scary bits, because I don't like scary things. And I could shut the door if it became too scary, you know. And then my mum actually stopped me watching it for a while because I was so scared of Cybermen that I was having bad dreams. And so she actually stopped me watching it for a while. I don't have any vivid memories apart from the maggots on the hillside in The Green Death. And then the sort of, I remember a vague memory of Bessie and Liz Sladen and John Pertwee. Jo Grant, I remembered like wanting to sort of give her a cuddle and look after her. And just this sort of general sense of Doctor Who. And Doctor Who was just a pervasive influence growing up in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah. Well, it does seem that, especially, you know, everyone who grew up in Britain in the past 60 odd years has had some experience with Doctor Who. I don't think it's not a show that you can escape easily. It sort of gets everywhere, doesn't it?
I think you'd have had to be a hermit if you didn't know what Doctor Who was.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, fast forward a little while, you know, there you're talking, you know, about the front end of Doctor Who and the middle period. Fast forward to sort of the end of Classic Who, and that's where you come in. That's where Ace, aka Dorothy McShane, aka everyone's favourite companion with a baseball bat, comes in. What was it like to go from, you know, watching this British institution growing up, and then all of a sudden you're slap bang in the middle of it what was it like?
Well, it was weird, as you can imagine. I didn't actually know that it was still airing when I went up for it. It was a surprise, it's like, oh yeah, Doctor Who. That's something I used to watch because I went away to university. I stopped watching. Had a vague memory of watching Peter Davison and knowing who Tegan was. Sort of the air hostess one. But I wasn't a religious watcher of Doctor Who, and I wasn't a fan, as I know fans to be now. So it was just as you said earlier, it was there in the background of my life, really. And so to be put up by my agent for 3 episodes of Doctor Who was like, in a way, a bit of a laugh, and also while recognizing that actually, wow, Doctor Who is a very well-known show, and never having done any TV before. So to then suddenly get the part, not only in the 3 episodes, but to be potentially the new companion, was like, it was surreal. And I was living in this basement flat in Lewisham at the time with some friends of my boyfriend's from university. And we were sort of paying very basic rent, living, I was working in fringe children's theatre, and then the job I was in when I got Doctor Who was in the back row of the chorus of a production of Fiddler on the Roof in Manchester. So it was so far away from this kind of glamorous life on TV that I imagined you'd have, which was actually not the case, but there we go. But it was so far removed from anything that I had envisaged for myself that it was weird. It was very odd. And then to actually be getting the bus from Lewisham, going down to the station, getting on the train, getting the tube to North Acton to the rehearsal rooms, and then oh look, I'm not getting emotional at the memory. On just got a frog in my throat. And then to be suddenly thrust into this world with, oh, there's Bonnie Langford off of the telly. There's Tony Asoba. There's Tony Selby. There's Pat Quinn. That's like, what is going on? There's little old me. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been so exciting. So obviously you exploded onto our screens, I would say, with a can of Nitro 9 in Dragonfire. So was it a case that you were, because you were sort of a supporting character in Dragonfire, and then you joined the TARDIS at the end of the episode? When you signed up, did you know you were going to be full-time companion, or was it something that was decided later on?
It was something that was decided later on. What had happened was that they were looking for somebody, that the back end of that last season. So, for example, you had the Kangs in the Happiness Patrol, not the Happiness Patrol, in Paradise Towers. You had Sarah Griffith's character Ray in Delta and the Bannermen, and you had Ace in Dragonfire. And originally I went up for the part of Ray in Delta and the Bannermen because I could ride a motorbike, and that was what was required for that part, except that they ended up swapping it. Sarah couldn't ride a motorbike, and I never got to ride one. So there we go. But so as soon as I read the audition speech for Ace, I thought, yes, I know this character. Don't know why, but I just felt really akin to her. I felt that I could really do her justice. And when my agent rang me, which was just such a shock and a surprise, that I'd got these 3 episodes, but it was more complicated. She said they were asking if I would potentially be interested in taking over as the companion. Duh. There's me in the back row of the chorus in a phone box, with my costume backstage, these sort of rags on equity minimum. And, would you like to be one of the most iconic characters on British TV history? I'll have a think about it. Yeah. I'm considering actually going back on the dole after this. I thought that would be, Anyway, so there it was. And yeah, just the most incredible opportunity. So when we started rehearsing, nobody knew that may happen, because I think I think Bonnie hadn't quite decided, or her agent hadn't quite sort of done the deal with John Nathan Turner that she was definitely going to leave. But then throughout that first week of rehearsals, I think negotiations must have been going on, or that's what Bonnie says afterwards, that she didn't realize that she could have stayed on, that was an option. She thought, oh, well, that's just what you do. You go off, you know. So anyway, I'm forever grateful to her that she did go. But so in the original script for Dragonfire, it was Ace that went off with Glitz at the end. That was how we rehearsed it, in fact. We rehearsed Ace going off with Glitz. And it's funny because Tony Selby, who didn't know anything about this potential that Ace would stay on, he kept saying all that first week, he said, do you know, Ace would make a brilliant Doctor Who assistant. It's a really good character, you know, Ace would be really good. And it was funny because I knew, and I didn't know that Sylvester knew as well, and that because obviously they had to check that Sylvester and I were going to work together and that I was going to get on with him and things like that, which we did absolutely straight away.
Yeah.
And still do all these years later, you know, he's one of my closest friends. Yeah, so by the time that first week ended and nothing had still been decided, but I was kind of not allowing myself to get too excited, but I was excited as well because I could see that it was going well. And then we went into studio for however long it was, 2 or 3 days. And at the end of that first day's shooting, the producer, John Nathan Turner, came down the steps of the gallery. They sent everybody else away. He lit up his cigarette in his customary manner, took a big puff, and he said to me, well, darling, he said, well, we're on if you're on. And I took that to mean, yes, it's a goer. And then when we came to recording the scene where where I originally was going to leave, Ian Briggs, who was the writer of Dragonfire, and Andrew Cartmel had to go out to the little tea bar cafe outside the studio and sort of scribble something hastily on a napkin, which, because they'd written something and Sylvester wasn't happy with it because it was just basically him saying, yeah, bye, thanks Mel, thanks for being around, see ya, and off she went. And he said, no. Mel has been with the Doctor through all this time, you know, the regeneration she's had to cope with. They've had adventures together. There's a relationship there. It's really important that this is done well. And so Andrew and Ian went off and worked from the script that Sylvester had in his audition speech, which was a goodbye to a farewell to a companion. And so they worked on that, and that became the goodbye scene for Bonnie.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was so up in the air till the last minute. I mean, this is what when I speak to people involved in the show, on the podcast, this is what strikes, is that from a fan looking in, you think everything's so meticulously planned and, you know, planned in advance, but you realise a lot of it is just let's just see what happens on the day. But I mean, it's
a very rude word I'm going to use. We used to call it KBS,
yeah,
which was when you were kind of rushing to get something done, which is kick, bollock, and scramble. And that's how it was, you know. Oh,
yeah,
God, you go over there and do that. You get yeah. There was definitely a plan, but as the best laid plans, they were thrown out of the window a lot of the time.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So, I mean, you touched on it there, you know, working with Sylvester. I think I've seen, I can't remember who it was who said it. I believe it was Sam Davis, who's a Doctor Who YouTuber, great YouTuber. He was talking about Tom Baker, and obviously we mean this in the best possible way. You know, sometimes you just touch on a casting where, you know, you find someone who is genuinely quite strange and eccentric. And I think Tom and Sylvester both fall in that category. I think Sylvester, you can tell that he's such a character all the time. I mean, obviously your relationship would have grown over the years, and you've been working with him since in Big Finish and things like that. I mean, what was he like on set? Was it just exactly how we'd imagine the eccentricities?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Sylvester is like, what I love about Sylvester is that he is perpetually curious about the world and curious about everyone, and also completely authentic. What you see is what you get, and what you get is just like what is there in the moment for Sylvester, you know. So and his Doctor was a sort of extension of that, and a kind of a honing of that. And he's definitely acting when he's playing his Doctor. It's not just him, like with Tom as well. And it's a character that he you know, he puts on the character of the Doctor, but there is Sylvester in there as well. And that wonderful eccentricity, as you say, the kind of and the wealth of experience that he's had down the years. You know, all his background in working with the Ken Campbell Roadshow and sticking ferrets down his trousers and banging nails up his nose and going off into kind of quite sort of deprived areas of the country, bringing crazy theatre to them. And this ability that he has to just be at home in every situation, just like he'll seek out adventure as well. So when he loves traveling, and wherever he is in the world, he'll get talking to people, he'll go exploring, he'll get himself into scrapes, he'll get himself out of scrapes. You know, he's just like this curious child, really, who wants to play.
Yeah, you get that. You get that on the screen 100%, because I watched this whole era at the beginning of the year. As people who've listened for a while know, like this time last year was about when I started watching classic Doctor Who. Always been a fan of new Doctor Who. But this era in particular of, you know, the Doctor and Ace, it just resonated with me so much. And I don't know whether it's because this is another thing that always gets brought up when Ace is mentioned, about Ace sort of being the template for the modern companion. And Russell definitely sort of continued on in a similar vein when he created characters like Rose and Martha. So it's probably that means that I connect with it so well. What are your feelings about that? I mean, because I think you can see a clear divide between like Mel and Ace. You know, Mel is very much a classic Doctor Who companion. You know, it's a role that had been firmly established over, you know, 20 or so years. And then you had this evolution. Were you happy about that? Like, obviously, to sort of got a bit more to play with, I imagine, when it came to acting in the role.
Yeah, well, don't forget that I hadn't seen Doctor Who for many years. So I didn't know the character of Mel, apart from the script that I got when I got Dragonfire. So when I got cast, to be honest, I was thinking, why me? Why are they thinking that I would be good at screaming and running and round quarries and spraining my ankle? Because that's not really who I am, but you know, I can do a good job of it. And then, of course, when I got the full script and realized, okay, so this is not the companion that I remember from years ago. Although having said that, Liz Sladen I thought was a really strong character, and then Louise Jameson's character Leela, she was a strong, although she was
Yeah.
having a costume for the dads, shall we
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
But so when I read the script, I thought, this is different. This is new. This is something that I understand and that I can do something with. And I think Bonnie was frustrated with the character of Mel because she could do so much more. And she has done in Big Finish, which is great. She's had the opportunity to do that. But I love the relationship between the two of them. I thought that worked really well.
Yeah.
This sort of protective, how Ace is to Donut,
Yeah.
And I like how that's been continued in the Big Finish stories as well. It's great. But I was very intrigued because I couldn't imagine why they'd want me, and then it did make sense, and I put that down entirely to Andrew Cartmel, the script editor, because that's what he was bringing to the show. Sorry, my husband's banging a lot of doors in the back.
That's fine, don't worry.
So Andrew came in and he and John Nathan Turner were in many ways like chalk and cheese. John was very much into publicizing the hell out of the show because he had to, because that was his job. He was trying to keep it on air, we've now found out. So he would use anything at his disposal, and he was very much a light entertainment man. Bonnie Langford, Kate O'Mara, Ken Dodd, that was his world, really, his world of variety and light entertainment.
Yeah.
Andrew came in. Here's a guy brought up in Canada, knowing nothing really much about Doctor who comes from this sort of comic book, darker side of things, and literary, academic, and he was bringing that, and I thought it was such a great injection of something completely new in Doctor Who, something completely different, and I think that absolutely made the character of Ace who she was, with Ian and Andrew working together on that. And then Ian Briggs, the writer of Dragonfire, had used 3 real girls to base the character of Ace on. He worked at an amateur theatre group, which is still one of the best in the country, the biggest in the country, called Questers in Ealing. And these girls who came from Perivale and West London sort of council estates and so on, they met there, and he worked with them and thought of them when he was writing the character of Ace, and that's who she was based on. So she had the advantage of being based in reality as well. And then of course I came along, and I was very much of a sort of bringing reality to character. And I just although I was 24 at the time and she was meant to be 16, I just kind of knew, I just really identified with who she was. I lived in Lewisham. I saw a lot of young people around. Whilst it was she has a completely different background to myself, I identified with that pissed off, moody teenager. As we all do, probably.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, sort of the girl who kind of, my parents, that. So it was great fun to bring all that into the character, and so that's why I think she was a much more realistic character than you've had before, and that's what was then bridging the gap, as you say, between that, because that's what Russell T Davies had in the back of his mind. There's Ace, council estate. Her stories were very important, particularly in the last season, in that season, the season 26, and it's like, okay, you can see almost a direct line to Rose. Rose is the central character in that first episode. Also, Sylvester had a hand in it because he wanted to be a more mysterious Doctor. So he was very willing to not so much take a back seat, but to let Ace have the development of the story so that this mystery of the Doctor could be examined, and that so what, you're not just a Time Lord, and who are you, says Ace at the end of Silver Nemesis.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of paving the way for the Doctor to be darker, look at survival. I mean, goodness me, defy anybody to say, who says, oh, Sylvester is a comedian Doctor. Watch Survival. I mean, it's very dark, very, very manipulative and creepy, and his Doctor is like very much in control of the whole of that season. So yeah, that was all brought into Rose, of course, and the Doctor was a bit more of a sort of in a way a sideshow in the first episode, and the story was very much about Ace, because the companion has always been the voice of the viewer. And it was a brilliant thing for Russell to do, to centre the programme for people who may know nothing about Doctor Who, to centre the programme in somebody, a real life person, in a sort of setting that they were used to seeing in kind of, soap opera, and then to suddenly have this weird character pop in, and who's that? I thought it was so clever.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, it's definitely an era that stuck out to me, and I think it is perfect for people who have only watched classic Who and then go into this series, or people who have only watched New Who. It's a great jumping on point as well for going back to the older episodes, because you can really recognize that Doctor companion relationship that definitely does carry on into New Who. I mean, like I said before, we've got so much to get through today. What we're going to do very briefly is take a little slide on over to the DVD shelf and see what Sophie would like to enter to the DVD collection.
By the power of Grayskull.
The Unicorn and the Wasp, or Love and Monsters?
Which one do you think I'll prefer?
No, I mean, which one do you want to watch first?
You are pulling my leg.
So, yes, I mean, this is always one of the most exciting parts of any podcast, because I never know what people are going to pick, and I love it, and I'm very, very excited and intrigued to hear what you're going to pick. So obviously we've got quite a lot of episodes in here already. Well, I mean, we've got so many. Let's have a little look. Let me get the list up, because I mean, some absolute classics. I mean, The God Complex, The Rescue, Bad Wolf, Part of the Ways, Terror of the Zygons, Christmas Invasion, Invasion of Time, Spearhead from Space, Stolen Earth, Journeys. We've got hundreds. But I'm intrigued. What would you like to submit to the DVD collection?
Okay, so my one, and I know I'm in it, so but it's I just think it is a classic. It's a story that works. It's a story that for all sorts of reasons, which I'll go into, but basically, big drum roll. You get my husband whistling and singing in the background now, by the way. I don't know whether you can hear that, but you can pretend you're the theme music, can't you? Always brought me a cup of tea. Result. Thanks, darling. Isn't that good?
Nice.
Oh, cheers, everyone.
Nice. I don't get this service on my end.
I know. He's great.
I'm going to have to get myself a tea, man. Definitely.
I think you are. Yeah, so with the background of him singing and whistling in the background, I'm going to choose, drum roll, The Curse of Fenrik.
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely pick. One of my favourites, I must say. What is it about Curse of Fenrik then? Obviously, I mean, we all know how bloody good it is. It is always brought up when it comes to this era of Doctor Who. But what is it for you that puts it above the rest?
Yeah, I mean, I could have said Remembrance of the Daleks as well, because obviously that's the classic one where I get to beat up a Dalek with a baseball bat, and you see Ace first appear in her real true colours as the companion. However, I was still finding my feet in that one. So Curse of Fenrik, it was our final season. Not that we knew that at the time, but we both really, Sylvester and I had really, I guess, got our feet under the table. We both knew the characters very well. We were very comfortable with each other, with the crew that we'd worked with before, and the whole team was just fantastic to work with. Everybody, crew, like cameras, even things like the gaffers and the backstage guys. They wanted to be there. They wanted to be doing Doctor Who. Costume, makeup. We're having a field day with the Haemovores. I thought the Haemovores were incredibly effective monsters. They were scary. They were really well executed. Which some of the stories that wasn't always the case. Being on a whole location story as well, that really worked. All the actors in the whole thing across the board were great, from the smallest parts to the biggest parts. And I just thought the story really worked. It was an Ian Briggs coming back to explain some stuff about Ace that had been kind of, it was clever because fans at conventions and things, I said, blew herself up in a time storm to Ice World. What's that all about? Okay, here's the explanation for you, you know? And the fact that there is a grander plan somewhere. What? Ace is somehow involved in this whole business, and that actually the Doctor had a plan all along, and that he's actually manipulated his companion. He's not as nice as we thought he was. There's something going on here about him that we don't really quite know. I just thought it all worked so beautifully together as a story.
Yeah, well, I think that sums it up beautifully. Like I said, I think, may I say, I think you're on top form in it, and I think Sylvester's on top form. I think it does just seem, obviously, as you said, you didn't know it was the end of Doctor Who. You know, we were, by broadcast, we were a few weeks away from the end of Doctor Who as we know it. And it's strange because, I mean, in hindsight, it looks like, well, they must have known, because, you know, they've given us a story like this, you know, that wraps so many things up. But it just happens to be a coincidence that, you know, the show then goes off the air a few weeks later. But I love Survival as well. But I do see this as, to me, it's the last big classic 10 out of 10 Doctor Who story for me. Like it was Doctor Who going, let's just go for it and go a little bit balls to the wall with the scariness and the, you know, character development. I absolutely love it. I think it's a great pick. Thank you for submitting it. I'm very happy that it's there.
Great.
Very
Oh,
happy.
Good.
And we're going to move swiftly on, because, as I said, our listeners are very, very excited about you being here, and they've asked some questions. So, as usual, we're going to take a little flyover to bloody Twitter.
For God's sake! Bloody Twitter!
We'll try and get through as many questions as possible.
Okay. That means don't talk too much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've just had a lot.
Answering short questions in a very long way. No, I'll be as concise as I can.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's just, I'm sorry to anyone that we don't get around to, but, you know, there's so many. It took me so long to go through all of these. So first question from Chiba City Blues. They have asked, I wanted to ask what it was like working with pyrotechnics, and do you have a favorite explosion that Ace caused?
That's a great question.
I
Oh
like
my
that one.
goodness, I loved working with pyrotechnics. I didn't know that that existed before I did Doctor Who. I'd never thought of that. So the visual effects crew were always like I used to hang out with them a lot because they were fun guys as well. And also I used to love making models when I was little, sort of airfix and making things. And to have a job making stuff and then blowing it up, I mean, what a job.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the explosions. I love the idea that Ace was just like right in the thick of it. Favorite explosions, there's a few actually. I love the sequence in Survival where I'm running away from the Cybermen and sort of ducking and diving, and then all these little explosions go off behind me. But I think my favorite explosion of all has to be the one that didn't involve me. It was actually in Greatest Show in the Galaxy. And it was when the tent was meant to, there was meant to be a great big wind or something. And all this debris was meant to fly out all over the place. And when they got down to the location, the visual effects crew they hadn't loaded the right, or something hadn't arrived in time. These great big fans so they thought, oh no, what we're gonna do? They thought, oh, we better blow it up instead. So they set this explosion, and they said to Sylvester, well, you're gonna feel a bit of wind behind you, nothing to worry about. You just carry on walking. And I was standing watching it by the camera. And so he starts walking, and behind him, this almighty blooming explosion goes off. And he said afterwards he could feel the heat. And he thought, is my back on fire? But he thought, well, we've only got one chance, so I'm going to just have to keep on walking.
Yeah, well, it's one of the best shots in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I love that shot so much. Chiba City Blues is actually as well. I know we covered this briefly. That probably the one question you get asked the most. What was it like beating up a Dalek with a baseball bat?
Oh, actually, it was more fun in rehearsals because, again, there was only one chance to do it. So we rehearsed it a few times, and then we did it. We went for it. It was one take possible, and I hadn't been told that the visual effects department, again, they were going to put Bunsen burners on and water and stuff like that. So that was a bit of a surprise. Anyway, I did the jumping, and I love all that. I'm quite a sort of physical performer anyway, so I loved doing all that and jumping over the tables. And then they had to reset before they had Tracy, who was my stunt double, go through the window because they didn't want me to do that on my first story out as the Doctor Who assistant and potentially have an accident and put me out of action. So I did it, and it was fantastic. The adrenaline was like, oh my goodness. So I sat down, and Tipping, who was the stunt coordinator, came over and he said, look, your adrenaline levels, he said, you've been through the equivalent of a kind of a car crash. So sit down, I'll go and get you a cup of tea, I'll break everybody for tea, and you just breathe and recover. So I sat down and everybody left the room. And then I heard this coming from somewhere. I thought, what's that? Little knocking sound. And a muffled voice, could somebody let me out, please? And it was the poor guy inside the Dalek. And nobody had thought to let him out for his cup of tea. He was stuck inside the Dalek.
Oh, that is wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I love that. I'm glad that you enjoyed it, because we all wish that we could batter a Dalek with a baseball bat as well.
It was funny though, because at the time I never thought how much of an iconic moment that would be, that nobody had ever actually taken on a Dalek with a baseball bat before, and that actually for a companion to do that was really quite something. So yeah, I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, definitely. So next question is from Ben at Real Enthusiast. I know that he's been doing a very similar journey to what I did last year and watching all of classic Doctor Who from the beginning.
Wow.
So he said, hi Sophie, very excited to watch your run on Doctor Who. I'm coming up to it very soon and I've heard nothing but great things. His question is, outside of Sylvester McCoy, who have you enjoyed working with on Big Finish productions the most, and who would you like to work with in the future?
Oh, that's really tricky.
It is tough. It's a tough one.
Well, so many. I mean, it wouldn't be fair to say, but I mean, people who are coming to mind, I'll give you a little list. And these are just the ones that are coming to mind. But it's like, of course, all the people like Lisa Bauman, Katie Manning, all the old companions, all the there's Clive Mantle, I'm thinking, Ian Reddington, who played the chief clown. I think that was a great one for me, because it was like Ian was is a superb actor, and he made that part of the chief clown in Greatest Show in the Galaxy. And then to have him actually playing something verbal, because he hardly had any lines, but he was such a central figure in Greatest Show. But to have that level of characterization and I don't know, it's just something about Ian. It's a sort of dangerous quality to his acting, which I love working with. All sorts. Phil Olivier in Big Finish, who played Hex. I mean, he's always wonderful to work with. Who else? Mark Bonner, of course. Mark is a good friend of mine. He took over from David Tennant. Well, David Tennant, of course. I love working with David. David was my sidekick on Tree Fu Tom children's program, which made me laugh, and an animation I did. And then he couldn't do. He did the first series, and then Mark Bonner took over from him. And did lots more series with him, and Mark and I became great friends, and he's just always wonderful to work with. I could go on and on and on.
Yeah, but I imagine there is a very, very, very long list there. The next question from Cal, good friend of the show, at generic_tweeting, said, are there any monsters that you really wished that Ace could have gone up against that she didn't?
I was so lucky. Dalek.
You got a good run, didn't you? I was just thinking.
Amazing.
You got the big three.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think actually I'd love to see Ace with a weeping angel. How she'd cope with a weeping angel.
I think a 7 Ace and Weeping Angel story would be great. I'd love to see Sylvester with the Weeping Angels as well. I'm not sure, because trying to keep up with Big Finish is tough. I don't know if it's been done already. I apologize if it has. I don't know, but I'd love to see that. Yeah, I'm not sure.
But then that's no great test of things.
Yes, well, Weeping Angels, that would be amazing. I'd love to see that. Samuel George Whitaker at Bramblesnap on Twitter.
Nice.
This is a great fact that I told a few of my Doctor Who mates the other day, and we were all astounded. Have you and Sylvester ever done anything to celebrate your shared birthday?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
August 20th, in case you were asking.
Yeah, because you, Sylvester, and Anthony Ainley all share the same birthday, which is incredible. So yeah, I mean, what have you done? Have you gone out clubbing with Sylvester?
We're usually in Edinburgh at the festival together.
Mm-hmm.
We've often been. So yes, I mean, he was at my, I think, 40th, 50th. I was at his 70th. Yeah, it's wonderful. And we love celebrating our birthday together. It's also my mum's birthday. So in fact, when was it? Was it 2 years ago we were up there? It wasn't last year. We celebrated together with my mum as well. So there was Sylvester and me and my mum all celebrating our birthday together.
What a day. What a day for you. An expensive day, I imagine. For everyone around you, yeah. Another dear friend of the show, Billy Garrett John, has said, from the perspective of someone so prominent in the fandom, and that is as a great ambassador for Doctor Who on the whole, how has your experience of the community changed since you first started attending conventions and interacting with fans?
Oh gosh, that's a great question.
I know it's a deep one, isn't it? It's a deep question.
Yeah, because let's see, my first convention, I was 24 years old. So it's been most of my life I've been attending now, or at least, over half of my life. I would say that Doctor Who conventions personally have given me a lot of confidence, and a lot of ability to talk in front of a lot of people. But really, in the latter years, what I've realised about conventions that I love personally is being able to make a difference to people on a large scale. Because here's a show that people love. It's a big part of people's lives. It would be tempting, and sometimes in the past I might have actually thought, oh, but actually it's really important to people. And you know that thing, like they say that real happiness comes from being able to be a contribution to other people, and to be able to be doing stuff for other people, not as a detriment to yourself, but so if you've got something to offer some other people, then that's what real happiness is. And that's what I experience, being able to make a difference to a fan in a 5-minute conversation, say, or writing a letter or whatever. I mean, that's a privilege. That's something that not many people have the opportunity to do. So yeah, I would say
that's lovely.
I also think it's very palpable in this last year where we haven't had the conventions, or we've had them online, how much me and the other people who were in the show, what a missing actually the conventions are for us as well as for the fans.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't wait to get back and.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, because I've not. It's like you said, it's so massive to the fans, because I mean, doing this podcast, I've had some mind-blowing experiences, this being one of them. Just chatting to people involved in the show is mental to me, and I pinch myself every day that I get to do it. But that, yeah, like being at conventions, I'm quite new to them. I've only been to a couple. I think I glimpsed you at Norwich Comic Con a couple of years ago, but I didn't get the chance to meet you. But that's some of the best days of my life. Meeting Tom and Peter and Sylvester. It's such an amazing experience for a fan, and it's so cool that people like yourself and all the other people who've been in the show are still to this day so passionate about it and still love doing the conventions. It's great to hear. And final question, again, apologies if we didn't get around to yours, but someone who was actually mentioned earlier on in the show, Sam Davis, at Dread_Davis on Twitter, amazing Doctor Who YouTuber. He's asking a question about something that I wanted to chat about briefly. If At Childhood's End had hypothetically been written earlier, which other Doctor Who teams could you picture Adult Ace reuniting with?
Oh, what an amazing question.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because at Childhood's End, she obviously meets the 13th Doctor, our first female Doctor. Yeah, what would it have been like if Adult Ace had met Matt Smith's Doctor, or Christopher Eccleston, or David Tennant, or Peter Capaldi? Yeah, I mean, that's a really. Do you know what? I think Adult Ace would go with any of them. Yeah, I'd love to explore that. That's a brilliant question.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a great one.
Yes, it probably would be. It would be a different dynamic for sure with all of them, like with all of the companions. But how
Mhm.
interesting to think about that. Mm.
Yeah. Well, that is the end of bloody Twitter, and we are coming close to the end of the show now. And we have just one little thing to touch on before we leave, which is, of course, the Corridor of Fame.
Have you ever been limited by who you were before?
One day, I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing.
Dear? Sarah Jane?
Do I have the right?
For some people, small, beautiful events is what life is all about.
Yes, and a nursery compared to us. 10 million years of absolute power. That's what it takes to be really
Every great decision creates ripples. Like a huge boulder dropped in a lake.
But it was a childish dream that made you a doctor. You dreamt you could no more.
No.
Just this once.
I'm not just the time. I'm the last of the time.
Just disappears, doesn't it? Everything you are gone in moment, like breath on a mirror.
I do what I do because it's right. Because it's decent. And above all, it's kind.
Love abides in the face of everything.
So the Corridor of Fame is, as we know, a wonderful place. It's full of names of big legends of Doctor Who. You know, all of the doctors are in. We've got, you know, Liz Sladen, Katie Manning, so many people. I would love to know who you would like to submit to the Corridor of Fame.
Okay, well, I've thought long and hard about this. And I went through a few people and I thought, well, first of all, the first person who came to mind was Andrew Cartmel. But then I knew that I'd be talking about him anyway. And lo and behold, we have. Ian Briggs is another one, the guy who came up with the character of Ace already, but we've spoken about him. So I'm going to go for a very unsung hero. And he's representative of all the people backstage, really, that I'd love to put them all in the Corridor of Fame, really. But this is costume designer Ken True. And Ken, he was just sort of pivotal to my time in Doctor Who. I could say Richard Croft as well, who was the first costume designer who I came across in Dragonfire. In fact, maybe I should have this generic costume designer in the Fame. But sadly, both Richard and Ken are no longer with us. But I think Ken in particular, I remember as just being a wonderful man to work with, unflappable, had a great team around him. Andrew Duckett, his assistant, and then all the dresses that he chose were always brilliant. And this is what you want with your costume designers and your makeup, is to have an unflappable team who are fun to be around, who you can talk to about anything, you know, if there's something going on. And Ken was one of those people. He was also extremely talented. And he was the costume designer. He did the Curse of Fenrik, and he did Survival, and he also did Remembrance of the Daleks. Now, I don't remember him so much on Remembrance, but he was actually so instrumental in allowing me, like Richard had in Dragonfire, to have my own ideas about the costume. So we'd already established the jacket by then. Yeah. But in Remembrance, he said, well, you know, he would always start off with me. What do you feel comfortable wearing? What do you think Ace? You know the character better than me. What do you think Ace would wear? And actually, Remembrance, I based that costume with him on my boyfriend at the time. He had this very cool, trendy sister called Charlotte. and she dressed in like Vivienne Westwood and and she had like this shock of dark curly hair, and she was so super trendy, and she wore these skirts over the top of leggings with big boots. So I thought, yeah, that's what I'm going to go for. So that's and Ken was great because he would just yeah, okay. And then, I mean, if you look at the details of he was just brilliant at those period costumes as well.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, those impeccable costumes. You've got Pam Salem in this. She looks $1 million, but she's wearing this kind of, in a way, quite frumpy sort of thing. And then you've got Karen Gledhill, the kind of ultimate sweater girl there. And you got, I mean, just all those soldier costumes, all impeccable, the dates and then you go on to Curse of Fenrik, again, another period drama, really. And I remember sitting in John Nathan Turner's office with Ken, and him just very sensitively going through and going, well, this is the research I've done about, we'd like to dress Ace in, rather than in her own clothes, we'd like to have her in a contemporary costume. And I thought, brilliant. And we looked at Land Girls, which actually gave me the idea for the Jodhpurs later in Battlefield. And then we looked at, he said, what about this? And he showed me this suit with a divided skirt, because I didn't really want to wear a skirt, but he kind of persuaded me into it, and the stockings and everything. And actually he was completely right. And he had that costume made up and a few copies of it. So yeah, I mean, it was just a joy to work with Ken, and he was just a kind of quiet but deadly funny, caring, just who you want around you on a set as well.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful pick. That's the whole reason why the corridor is here. So we can celebrate unsung heroes of Doctor Who. And yeah, some great costumes from that time, like you said. Absolutely top class pick. Love that one. So I mean, we've come to the end of the show. I mean, we've there's so much more that we could talk about.
I know.
We could do this all day. I mean, we've barely even touched on At Childhood's End, which obviously I do apologise. I've been reading it over the past week, and I absolutely adore it. I just want to say that it is absolutely incredible, and I just think you nail, in terms of writing, not just the 7th Doctor and Ace, but the 13th Doctor and Ace, and those characters. It's right up there for me. One of my favourite Doctor Who books I've read. So,
great.
as I said, I apologise that we didn't get onto it, sooner. But everybody at home, please go and buy it, because it's fantastic. I have one final question before we go.
Yeah.
And it's a question that always seems to be a stumbling block for people when I get them on. It's always a tough one, mainly because I always say in a sentence, but I'm not going to restrict you. But in a sentence, what does Doctor Who mean to you?
I would say, gosh, it's quite emotional, actually. Doctor Who has made me who I am today.
Perfect. I think that's my answer. That is almost word for word exactly what I say. So that's fantastic, and it's been fantastic having you on. I mean, where can people find you? Obviously, everyone knows who you are, but I know you're on Twitter, and plug away whatever you want to plug.
Well, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, and the best place to find me actually is probably my website, which is reasonably new, sophiealdred.com. And then it's got all my social media stuff, what I'm, things I'm up to. I've got a shop for the
Got a
first
shop,
time.
a little
You
shop.
can buy my book on the shop and I'll autograph it and everything. And I love it. I package everything up myself and I send it all up.
That's great. That's great. Well, yeah, please go and buy the book, please. I just can't get over it. I'm gonna go read a little bit more of it. But yeah, thank you for coming on. And thank you everybody for listening. As I said, this is the end of series 2. The podcast is going to be going on a little break, but we will be back later on in the year with some more fantastic guests, and maybe we'll have Sophie on again in the future. I would adore that.
We've got a lot more to talk about.
A lot more to talk about. I'm sure you will make a reappearance. But thank you, and thank you again for coming on, and thank you to everybody at home.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure.
Lovely stuff. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. You can check us out wherever you get your podcasts and now on YouTube. Please subscribe and leave us a review wherever you can, as it really helps us out. And a massive thanks to the Sononauts for lending their cover of the Doctor Who theme to be the theme for the podcast.